the Illuminati, Freemasons, Skull and Bones, the not-so-secret secret societies, who meet in the shadows, pulling strings and controlling the world. Or do they? What if real power isn't a person or even a group? What if it is a system, an ancient policy set in motion centuries ago? Welcome back to Decoded. I want to start off this episode by thinking about power. Not just any kind of power, the kind of power that comes with a crown or running a country. Now, I want you to think of that kind of power like the ring in Lord of the Rings. It doesn't matter who puts the ring on their finger, the ring shapes the wearer. For the rest of this episode, I want you to think about oligarchical power systems the exact same way. Different names and faces, but the same underlying methods of power and control, passed down through bloodlines. They don't just inherit a title, they inherit a worldview, one that shapes them from birth. A perspective that perpetuates itself regardless of who wears the crown. In previous episodes, we traced the oligarchical system back to ancient Babylon, Persia, and Macedonia. In this episode, we examine how those ancient methods moved through medieval bloodlines. As we explored in previous episodes, the Persian model traces back to the cult of Apollo and was upheld by the Macedonian court of Philip, a system that suppresses urban culture and technological progress in favor of landlord oligarchy. This journey continues on into medieval Europe, with the acquisition of a name. This story sounds like a Game of Thrones storyline, but it isn't fiction. It's historical fact. This can get a bit confusing, so I've created a timeline showing the genealogical and political connections that will be discussed in this video. Let's take this journey into medieval history. Starting with the Guelph family, a powerful German aristocratic house in the Holy Roman Empire, whose power spread to Italy in 1080 AD, when one of Italy's most powerful rulers, Matilda of Tuscany, aged 43, married 17-year-old Guelph V. Not only was she the OG cougar, she was an extraordinary woman. She was one of the most powerful women in medieval Europe, and one of very few women to rule in her own right, command armies, and wield genuine political power. I actually think she deserves an episode of her own. Maybe I should do one decoding the life of Matilda of Tuscany. Let me know if you would like to see that in the comments. Side note, in my head, this is how I imagine their wedding night. As I'm sure you can imagine, this wasn't a romantic union. It was a medieval power move. Spoiler alert, the marriage was a disaster, and in 1095 they separated. Guelph V returned to Bavaria and switched sides, making peace with Henry IV, the very emperor the alliance opposed. Despite the marriage failing, the Guelph, Italianized Guelph name endured and became synonymous with the pro-papal cause across Italy. LaRouche explains this faction was a network of bankers, military commanders, aristocratic houses, and church officials, a pro-pope, anti-emperor alliance. Overseeing this ambitious and dangerous plan, Pope Urban II, whose goal was to forge a single power bloc stretching from Rome through northern Italy all the way to Bavaria. If it worked, they would control critical trade routes between Italy and Germany. Financing this alliance was the Perileone family, powerful Roman bankers who had converted from Judaism to Catholicism around 1050. This conversion wasn't about faith. It was about access to power. In medieval Europe, Jews were banned from holding political office, owning land in many places, and participating in Christian institutions. But a converted Christian banker could fund popes and operate at the highest levels of European politics. Matilda supplied Italian armies and land. The Guelph family supplied Bavarian military power, and the House of Lorraine, Matilda's maternal line, linked the entire coalition to French and German aristocracy. Lorraine wasn't just another region. It sat directly on the fault line between France and the Holy Roman Empire. Control Lorraine and you control the Alpine Pass, the trade routes, and the ability to move armies between Italy, France, and Germany. It was the geographic key to the entire chessboard. The Hohenstaufen dynasty, based in Germany, ruled as the Holy Roman Empire on and off from 1125 to 1268. During this period, the conflict between emperor and pope played out across Italy. The Guelphs supported the pope, the Ghibellines backing the emperor. For over a century, these two factions tore Italy apart in what became known as the Guelph-Ghibelline conflicts. Between 1266 and 1268, the Guelph faction defeated the Hohenstaufen line. The final blow coming in 1268 when Conradin, Frederick II's grandson, was publicly beheaded in Naples, ending the bloodline entirely. At the onset of the 14th century, a split occurred that would define oligarchical power for the next 7 centuries. The Italian branch of the Guelph aristocracy split into 2 factions, the White Guelph and the Black Guelph. The Whites aligned with humanist policies, while the Black maintained the anti-humanist oligarchical model. The Black Guelph were victorious, and their anti-humanist model spread across Europe, with most aristocratic families adopting their policies. In modern-day Italy, they're still called the Black nobility. However, not all aristocratic families followed the Black Guelph path. One exception to this was the Bourbon House of Spain and France. The humanist tradition started with Louis XI in the 15th century, continued through the House of Navarre in the 16th century, and was carried forward by the 17th century politiques. Within the politiques were 3 key figures who executed a deliberate campaign against the Habsburg power. Cardinal Richelieu started the anti-Habsburg offence in the 1620s to 30s. His successor, Cardinal Mazarin, finished it by forming an unlikely alliance with England's Oliver Cromwell in the 1650s. Then Jean-Baptiste Colbert used the victory to build France's economy and infrastructure in the 1660s to 80s. 3 men, one continuous humanist policy. After the defeat of the Habsburgs, the throne of Spain passed to a French Bourbon prince, Philip of Anjou, who became Philip V of Spain. This was the beginning of the Bourbon house, a single royal line ruling both France and Spain. Across the English Channel, another dynasty provided a similar example of a humanist monarchy within oligarchical structures. The Tudors. The English Tudors were a royal dynasty that ruled from 1485 to 1603. 118 years that shaped the country. They were the bridge between medieval England and the modern nation state. They centralised government power, reduced feudal baron control, expanded education, and laid foundations for modern law, navy, trade, and science. They turned England into a rising world power. But here's the complexity LaRouche identifies. The Tudor dynasty was oligarchical. They came to power with backing from Louis XI of France, a king known for absolutist, centralised control. So where did England get its progressiveness from? According to LaRouche, not from the crown itself, but from the humanist policy circle within the state. Specifically, the Dudley family, who weren't monarchs themselves, but humanist advisors and courtiers working within the oligarchical system. LaRouche credits them as key to everything decent that occurred in England. This highlights the fundamental problem with hereditary monarchy that both Machiavelli and Thomas Paine identified. You're gambling your nation's future on a genetic lottery. A great king who promotes science and development could be followed by his incompetent or tyrannical son, who reverses everything. Then his grandson might swing back the other way. The policy direction of the entire state can shift with every generation, sometimes towards humanist interests, sometimes towards oligarchical interests. And some monarchs flip-flop. For example, Elizabeth I wavered depending on which faction held favour. For humanist progress, this instability is a disaster because progress needs decades, even centuries, of consistent policy. This pattern of oligarchical infiltration and controlled opposition wasn't limited to Western Europe. The history of Russia's czars reveals the same methods, with an added layer: deliberate corruption. The humanist leaders of late Byzantium, the Paleologs, rose to power through a persistent conspiracy. Around 1106 AD, Henry V of Germany sent the Italian humanist aristocratic family to infiltrate Byzantium. The Paleologs ruled until 1453, when Turkish forces conquered Byzantium. A fall arranged by the prominent Aristotelian patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Church in Constantinople, and the bankers of Rome that traditionally controlled the papacy. The irony? Byzantium's own Orthodox Church leaders conspired with Roman Catholic bankers, centuries-old enemies working together to destroy the humanist dynasty. Theology divided them, but oligarchical power united them. The Paleologs' humanist influence in Russia led to the policies of Ivan III and Ivan IV. But Habsburg control spread across mainland Europe, undoing much of the Tsar's humanist efforts, plunging Russia into chaos. In 1613, the chaos was resolved by the rise of the Romanovs. The Romanovs initially continued humanist policies, but became increasingly infiltrated and controlled by Anglo-Dutch interests. According to LaRouche, after Peter I, most Romanov Tsars died at politically convenient times for Anglo-Dutch interests. It was no coincidence that English doctors were attached to the Tsarist households at those times, a practice that was not only common among European royal courts, but also seen as cosmopolitan. However, LaRouche argues this prestige was actually a penetrating strategy, a way for British intelligence to position themselves to win either way. They would place English physicians in the Tsarist households while simultaneously funding the anarchist revolutionaries who were trying to overthrow those same Tsars. Whether the monarchy survived or fell, Anglo-Dutch interests would shape Russia's future. When Count Witte pursued policies promoting Russia's industrial development with Germany, the 1905 revolution conveniently erupted. LaRouche identifies Anglo-Dutch agent Alexander Parvis and his protege Lenin Trotsky in leading roles, suggesting the revolution was manufactured to disrupt Russian-German cooperation. The British oligarchy prioritised maintaining control over fostering development. Henry C. Carey observed, the British system wasn't industrial capitalism. It was a mixed economy where industrial capital was subordinated to parasitic landlord interests. Their wealth was based on extracting value from land ownership rather than creating value through industrialization. The wealth oligarchy would rather go into debt suppressing industrial capitalism than to allow it to flourish and risk losing control. LaRouche states the black wealth oligarchy of Britain and their allies have set plans to usher in a new dark age through war and economic oppression. They intend to drastically reduce the global population to 1 billion people, while dismantling industrial capitalism to restore oligarchical control. Their goal is to establish a feudal utopia by the end of this century. I want to show you a video from a staunch ally of the anti-humanist faction, Bill Gates.
In this year's annual letter, Melinda and I take the toughest questions we get asked and give our answers. One that's come up for a long time is, as we make the world healthier, is the population going to get so big that feeding everybody and maintaining the environment is going to be impossible? Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary. We go from less than 1 billion in 1800 and 7.4 billion where we are today is happening even faster. So Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive, would that create more of a population problem? What we found out is that as health improves, families choose to have less children. And this effect is very, very dramatic. We find that in every country of the world, this is repeated. The population growth goes down as we improve health. So we've taken that chart that shows the global population growth, and we've actually extended it out all the way to 2100. And we can see that instead of continuing, it actually flattens out. Another way to see that is through this rate of population growth. And you can see that in the 60s, that reached a pretty high number, over 2% per year, and it's now come way, way down. Now, 11 billion people, still a lot, but the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down.
Did you catch that? This video was posted 7 years ago, and the end date, the proposed end goal, is 2100, the end of the century, just as LaRouche wrote in 1978. It's their long game, hidden in plain sight, and it's not the only thing written in this document you can see in action today, if you're paying attention. The premise of this document from the start has been humanist versus anti-humanist, Platonic versus Aristotelian, which sounds black and white, but it's more nuanced than that. We are taught to see the world in simple terms, like good versus evil. But truth isn't found in simplicity. It's hidden in the complexity of reality. The only way to see beyond the surface is to recognize the patterns hidden within the system. The patterns that repeat across centuries. The patterns that connect Philip of Macedonia to medieval Europe. For example, Henry V was a pro-imperial oligarch who went to war to maintain the emperor's right to appoint bishops. He fought to preserve oligarchical power. Yet around 1106 AD, he sent a humanist aristocratic family from Italy to infiltrate Byzantium. Seemingly a contradictory move. Or was it? Maybe Henry had humanist advisors like the Dudley family who pursued their own agenda within his court. Maybe he didn't even know what he had done. Or maybe, and this is dark, maybe he was following the plan. A plan to use humanists to develop societies, just to destroy them in the future. The humanists build, the oligarchy harvest, then the cycle resets. What if that is the pattern, carried out by one continuous lineage of power? And just like the ring in Lord of the Rings, that power transcends mortality. Kings die, emperors fall, but the knowledge endures. Always the same goal: control. I think the wealth faction, the European royal families and their allies are still running the Aristotelian anti-humanist Persian model today. But you can't have a one-sided battle. So who are they up against? I think they are in battle with the Trump faction. I don't know exactly who is in the Trump faction, but I'm going to play you a video that I think will explain.
Okay. So these are the three missions of the Freemasons, and they've achieved the first two. They've warped reality by creating a nuclear bomb. They've killed the king, JFK. And the third thing they want to do is create life, which is AI. Okay? In fact, we can also guess where this AI will take place. This is the equator. 33 degrees north of the equator are 4 places. Okay? Now, 33 degrees is very important in Freemasonry. There are 33 degrees in Scottish Rite Freemasonry. It's a very sacred number. Right? So, 33 degrees north of the equator, you have 4 places. The first place is Trinity Site, New Mexico in America, which is where they tested the atomic bomb. Okay? You go over across the Pacific to Japan, 33 degrees north is Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 33 degrees north in America is Dallas, Texas, where they killed JFK. So the last mission of Freemasons to achieve their vision for the world is creating AI, right? Now the question is, where would they do it? And the answer is 33 degrees north of the equator, right? And where's that? Jerusalem. So this is the end game, guys. The Freemasons will create artificial intelligence in Jerusalem, and this will become the world government. Again, this is just conspiracy theory. Don't believe this. This is just for fun, okay? But if it happens like this, then that's interesting, okay? But that is the grand plan, to create a world government in Jerusalem. And where's the center of this world government? Solomon's Temple. Because the Freemasons believe that their founder was the one who created Solomon's Temple. So by recreating Solomon's Temple, you close the circle, okay?
I didn't tell you what the video was about before playing it because I wanted you to watch it without any preconceived ideas. I think it's a very interesting concept, and I think he makes a very compelling argument. I think it explains political connections that go beyond ethnicity and godly promises. If you watch the rest of the video, which I recommend and I will link to, you will see these people have strong beliefs, and these beliefs are what's driving their mission. So if the Freemasons are in opposition to the wealth faction, and the wealth faction are anti-humanist, does that make the Freemasons humanist? Absolutely not. That's the thing. It doesn't have to be anti-humanist versus humanist. It can be anti versus anti with a twist of humanist. And I think that is what happened with Trump. I'm going to let Baron Coleman explain why.
This is a news story we had back during the first Trump administration, 2019. This was June of 2019. Iran allegedly shot down a drone, a U.S. Air Force drone. Obviously, because it's a drone, there were no people on board. But Trump was urged to strike Iran. And he was 10 minutes away from the strike happening. And he said he called it off. And I want to focus on why he called it off, because I want to compare Trump 1 and Trump 2 here. He said he called off the Thursday strike in Iran after he was told 150 very likely would be killed. Here's his quote. He said this in a series of tweets. I have the tweets, but I may not pull them up. We were cocked and loaded to retaliate last night on 3 different sites when I asked how many will die. Upon hearing the projected death toll, Trump said he decided the strike was not proportionate to shooting down an unmanned drone. He put a halt to the operation 10 minutes before the strike was set to begin. This is a very different Donald Trump than we have today. I do not anticipate the strike on Iran will be called off this time, and I think a lot more than 10 people will die, or 150 people will die. I think more than 150 people already have died in the operations over in Iran.
Trump 1 appeared humanist in rhetoric, anti-war, American first, human life as a stated priority. Trump 2, less American first, and more meddling in the Middle East. As I record this episode, we're watching and waiting to see if the US will strike Iran. So what has changed? Based on the historical patterns, I'd argue Trump started out with humanist intentions, and they, by they I mean the Masons, were okay with that, until they weren't. I think they infiltrated his movement just before his re-election in 2024. Whether that was with money or blackmail, it doesn't matter. It happened. If you've watched my previous episodes, you know the devil is in the detail, meaning details distract us from seeing the patterns. The pattern I see now is that of 2 anti-humanist factions scrambling to be the one that controls the one world government. It looks like the humanists have no representation in this fight for global domination. So I think that means it's up to us. We need to take up the humanist cause before we find ourselves enslaved in either a feudal dystopia or an electronic prison. I have one last video to show you. It's a clip of Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney pledging allegiance to the New World Order in China. I would like to dedicate this video to anyone who still thinks a one world government is a conspiracy theory.
I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
This is the evidence we demand, but so rarely get. A government official saying the quiet part out loud, officially, on the record. Them being so brazen is giving final boss energy, and it feels like they're going balls to the wall. I hate to end an episode on a negative note, so here are my words of wisdom. There may be thousands of them, the elites, but there are billions of us, the people. Nothing happens without our participation. So until next time, may the truth be with you.